it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Barbara Sina from the Fogarty International Center at the National Institutes of Health. Barbara is, I have known her for many years through our work with the Global Infectious Disease Training Grant, and she is the strongest advocate for capacity development, research capacity development, and a wonderful advocate for all of us. So without further ado, Barbara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be invited into your group to talk today, and hopefully you'll learn about new opportunities for infectious disease grants through the Fogarty International Center at NIH. Mario asked me to say a bit about what I do at NIH. I'm a program officer, which means that I help manage grants. And in particular, the Fogarty International Center focuses on primarily training grants that build research capacity. And my portfolio covers the infectious disease research training grants, except for HIV. And I have a group of bioethics training grants, international bioethics training grants. And I also coordinate a program across the continent of Africa called H3 Africa, which aims to build genetics and genomics capabilities in the continent. So if we can go to the next slide.
Right. Okay.
Thank you very much. So I don't know how many people in the audience are familiar with NIH, but just to point out that it's a very big and complicated place. It's actually the National Institutes, plural, of Health. And there are 26 of these. And the Fogarty International Center is one, and quite the smallest one in terms of budget and personnel in the entire group. One of the large ones, which you've probably heard more about this year than ever before, is the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease that's run by Tony Fauci. And it's the primary source of infectious disease research funds at NIH. The Fogarty International Center, as I said, has a very small budget, but somehow we're expected to cover all the countries in the world and all the diseases that the rest of the National Institutes of Health cover with our small budget. So we do our best, but it's a limited and very carefully chosen portfolio of what we do. Next slide, please. So our mission is to build research capacity in low and middle income countries. All of our grant programs involve US and low and middle income country research collaborations. And when our grants are reviewed, they're reviewed at the same criteria as the rest of NIH for scientific merit, but we have a special part of the review of our grants that includes the capability for having impact on research capacity. We have 3 flavors of grants. Our primary one are research training grants. Then we have career development grants, which are an unusual. They're not exactly postdoctoral grants, and I'll explain them when I get to that, but they're a category to try and enhance new faculty researchers establishing themselves. And finally, we have some very selected categories for research grants, a few of which I thought might be interesting to some of the group here. Next slide, please. So this is a bit old from fiscal year 2019, but as you can see, this is sort of a pie of where we spend our dollars, and 60% of them go for our research training grants, another 11% for career development, and a minority of around 30% for our research grants. This is highly unusual at NIH, where almost all the money NIH goes out to other universities, primarily in the US, for research in those universities. Next slide, please. So I'm focusing just on the infectious disease types grants we have today, because I thought that would be of most interest to you. And we have 2 infectious disease research training program. We have one that totally focuses on HIV. That's actually sort of a leftover from a set-aside budget that was established when HIV was very new and very epidemic across the world. And they set aside a portion of grant money at NIH to totally focus on HIV. And we have a special program just for HIV. And then the Global Infectious Disease Research Training Program I manage is supposed to cover all the rest of the infections out there. So it's a big and broad portfolio. Each of these programs offers a planning grant option that only low and middle income country applicants can apply for. And generally these grants are up to $250,000 per year for 5 years. Next slide, please. So all of our research training grants are what we call institutional grants. In other words, they're not individual fellowships. They're not meant to be just a number of slots for how many PhD people can you train or how many postdocs can you train. The applications can be submitted by either partner in the collaboration, either from the LMIC Institute or the US Institute as the PI. And you can easily delegate multiple PIs. So they can share being PIs in the grant. But as most NIH grants are direct to institutions, not actually grants to individual people, we have to have the grant submitted by one institution or the other. The planning grants, however, we only accept them from low and middle income country applicants. The whole idea is a bit, as I said, beyond just funding a number of PhDs or postdocs, but to build a critical mass of researchers that after you're finished with 5 years of funding can begin to conduct their own independent research at a low and middle income country institution. And we think of this as more than just scientific training, because we know that researchers have to have not only many other skills, but that their institution also has to be able to support them to conduct research. So we encourage people to include training in these other we call them career skills, such as writing scientific grants, learning how to give a scientific presentation, data management, research integrity. If you're involved in clinical research, GLP, GCP, biosafety, research administration, and if you need it, English as a second language for your trainees. We expect that there is a significant travel budget in these research training grants to go in for trainees to go between partnerships, but that most of the research will be actually conducted in the low and middle income country. And certainly the degrees can come from either place. If you have degrees, or if you're training people in just technical skills in a non-degree program. Next slide, please. So these are some links to get to the program announcements for the Global Infectious Disease Program or the planning grant. The program announcements are very long and boring bureaucratic documents, but they actually do provide all the information you need to submit an application. And then I usually recommend that people go to the web pages where we list all the current grants of a program that we fund. So in this particular case, the Global Infectious Disease Grants, and that includes links to the abstracts and the specific aims. So it gives you a very good description of what's going on in these programs. And if you can kind of understand if your ideas about the training programs match up, or if there's, continuity, you can find other possible training programs that may exist in the same country or even in the same institution if you haven't heard of them yet. So it's an interesting tool. Next slide, please. And I assume these slides can be shared with everybody easily, so hopefully you can do that. So the Global Infectious Disease Program, as I said, covers all infections. We're particularly interested in ones around emerging infectious diseases, especially this year. In tropical diseases, including vector biology, which I know there's a lot of expertise in this group for. We look for diseases that are applications that focus on diseases that occur frequently as co-infections in HIV-infected individuals, such as TB or cryptosporidia. And we also, in an area we see increasing interest in, are looking for training grants that focus on the infections that are associated with non-communicable diseases that may have very large public health significance in your country. Again, the types of training you provide can be either in the prevention, clinical, or public health approach. They can be epidemiology, behavioral science, anything in the health range is a type of training that you can provide. One qualifier for the Global Infectious Disease grants that's people consider a little difficult, although we've had many people back us up on reasons for doing this, is that the PI has to be also the PI of a research grant. And this can be from any funder, doesn't have to be from NIH, could be from WHO, could be from your own government, but it has to have 18 months of funding remaining at the beginning of when you submit the grant application. And the reasons for this requirement, from what we've heard, is that our reviewers tell us that they know the grants can't support a research environment. Training grants can't provide large equipment. They can't provide a lot of the things in the research environment that only you can get on a research grant. And the other thing is that they insist that people who are currently funded by research grants know how to teach other people how to get research grants and become independent scientists. So they're very keen on that as a requirement. The next slide, please. So this is the current portfolio of infectious disease grants that I'm managing right now. You can see that about half of them are in Africa, and we have several in Latin America. Peru has the most, but we would love to see many other countries in Latin America take advantage of this opportunity. And they're divided by, the coloration has to do with the income levels by the World Bank. So the green are the lowest income countries as designated by the World Bank. The purple are middle income countries, and the yellow are upper middle income countries. Next slide, please. So here's what a planning grant for GID could contain, and this has just changed a bit recently. The planning grant, the purpose is actually to plan whatever you need to write the actual full application for the large, training grant application. So it can, as well as planning with your collaborators, it can also support applicants to strengthen the training skills and the faculty that are going to be involved. Lots of people use this support. It's not a high level of support, but they use the support to conduct a training needs assessment, to hold meetings with their collaborators, and again, to work on curriculum or to work on how to get a new degree program started. Many things you can do during this planning grant period that will strengthen your full training grant application. Next slide, please. I mentioned the career development grants, and we have two types of these. This grant called Global Health Program for Fellows and Scholars is actually for graduate students, postdocs, and junior faculty. And the idea of this grant is a bit different in that we're trying to attract people into research careers that involve low and middle income country research. So it is both for a combination of US trainees and low and middle income country trainees. And the way it works is it's primarily a clinical research placement that takes place over a year with an extensive orientation ahead of time and in very in-depth mentorship. And the universities listed here are the ones who have a network of overseas sites where there's research being conducted. And they actually, anyone who wants to be involved applies in their program, and they make the selection and they arrange the orientations and the mentorship and the placements. So if anyone is interested, you need to contact this university, one of those universities, and find out how to apply. And these applications are once a year, and then the follow-up happens for 12 months afterwards. Next slide, please. And the career development grants we have are, we have one program that's just for US postdocs, but we have a very competitive and very sought after Global Leader Award for junior faculty in low and middle income countries. And the idea here is that this is for people right at the beginning of their research careers who have not yet already obtained a research grant. And it's to help them generate the preliminary data to obtain a research grant. So it's meant to free them up from other responsibilities such as teaching and clinical responsibilities for at least 75% of their time so they can focus on research. It has a research budget, and it allows them to collaborate with a US mentor of their choice and obtain additional advanced skills, as well as mentorship skills in grant writing and presentations and other things that can really jumpstart their career. So this again has one deadline a year, and it's wildly popular, I have to say at this point. Next slide. This provides a little bit more description of this 5 years of support. Again, it includes salary support and research support for a project. The applications are a little different than a straight research grant application in that you have to propose a career development plan as well as a research plan for the 5 years of the grant. And if you have more questions, I can certainly direct you to the program officer that manages this overall program. I tend to be assigned as a program officer afterwards for those who are working on the infectious disease areas that I manage. Next slide, please. And these are the research grants that Fogarty provides. And the way we come up with the areas that we're going to support in infectious disease research are trying to find the things to catalyze new areas that have been overlooked by the rest of NIH, particular NIAID. We do not try to compete with them to fund the same things because they have an enormous budget and we don't. So one area that has really blossomed in the last few years is infectious disease related to brain disorders. And then we have a couple programs that we've catalyzed research related to HIV. One in the non-communicable diseases associated with long-term drugs and environmental impacts in HIV infected people who are on therapy. And then the other is trying to come up with new interventions to reduce stigma related to HIV infections. And so the links are there and you can find out more about those programs. Or if anyone's interested, I can put you in touch with the program officers in charge of these. Next slide, please. So I included a few slides at the end just of resources I thought might be useful to people. I'm not going to go into them in depth, but NIH is maintaining 3 or 4 pages of really deeply informed COVID resources. So there's both research information, there's clinical information, and there's Fogarty has a special page of resources related to COVID that's specific for global health researchers. And some of the new funding opportunities related to COVID are also listed on these pages if you're interested. Next slide. And I also pulled together a set of resources that are maintained on the NIH websites about grant writing. I have to say, the ones I think are really useful are the set of actual grants that have been anonymized. They're on the NIAID website. And so you can see what they think a good grant looks like. And also there's samples of the forms and the plans that you have to fill out, which can take as much work as actually writing the research proposal, in my experience, as a faculty member, before I came to NIH. Some of these videos are useful and that you can see how things are reviewed. There's also a list of NIH terminology. We're a big bureaucracy with lots of acronyms. So it's really useful to look some of those up sometimes. Anyway, I hope those would be useful. And then the last slide,
Sorry.
If you can change to the last slide. So this is a funding page that Fogarty maintains, and it has not only all our links to our funding opportunities, but all the rest of the NIH funding opportunities that foreign institutions can apply for, as well as non-NIH sources. So Wellcome Trust, WHO, Grand Challenges from Gates, et cetera, are all listed here. And you can also subscribe to a funding newsletter that we put out once a week with all the new applications on this page. So the link is on the top there. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.